Assalamu alaikum and a good evening to you all. It is both a privilege and a pleasure to address this occasion on a matter which is very close to my heart and which I think will not only dictate the course of the legal profession but also the future of our nation. So today's subject matter, July Charter reforms, implementation challenges and the way forward. It gives us an opportunity to reflect on a rare constitutional moment in our political and legal history. Now, most of us have some idea what the July Charter is. It is still in the process of being drafted, as you all know. The next meeting of the National Consensus Commission with the political parties will be held on the 5th of October, so that's next week. And the parties have not yet reached a consensus on the way forward. There is large-scale agreement, or broad agreement rather, on the major constitutional reforms that we want to achieve, but we still need to agree on the manner of implementation, and that has been a stumbling block in the last few meetings of the National Consensus Commission. And unfortunately, the major political parties have taken widely divergent views regarding the mechanism for implementation, which is why we are in a sort of a crisis. I don't like to use the word crisis, but we are facing some challenges. I think that's better. So the Charter, as you know, it's more than a political document. It records the consensus of the political parties regarding constitutional reforms, but it is more than a political document. As I see it, it is a crystallization of the demands of the ordinary people for a more democratic, more accountable, more just legal order. And that is why it is so important that we really find a way of implementing the July Charter. And this is also because of the fact what is the source of authority of the July Charter. It has emerged from the July Revolution, where students and citizens they fought together and they brought down a despotic regime. So it is predicated. The July Charter is predicated not only on the blood of young people, but also on the hopes and aspirations of the people for a better and more just legal order. And that is why it is so very important that we all get together and try and find ways of implementation of the reforms that have found their place in the July Charter. Now, one of the points that have been discussed is with regard to the constituent power of the people. This is the power that the people always have. Even when you have a written constitution, the power of the people to shape their political future, to shape their democratic future, to shape their constitutional journey can never be taken away. Some scholars have likened this power, the constitutional power of the people, to a sleeping giant. It's always there, it is dormant, but when there is a political upheaval, when there is a rupture in the constitutional journey, the constituent power revives, it sort of triggers. And that is what happened on 5th of August 2024. That was a constitutional moment for us. That was a rupture from the past, that was a break in our constitutional journey. And that was when this inherent power of the people that was released, that was sort of triggered. And that has given rise to the July Declaration and all the process that we are seeing today of implementing the July Charter. Now, how do we chart the path from aspiration to implementation? Because the Charter is an aspirational document. I don't know whether you've read it, but when on pen and paper it looks very ambitious, it looks good. It contemplates sweeping reforms, transformation of state institutions, and nothing short of a renegotiation, if you like, of the democratic compact. So it is a wonderful document, but how do we chart the way from aspiration to implementation? That is where we are stuck. And the path forward is strewn with challenges. Some of it are legal, but most of them are political. I have said this on many occasions that if we can arrive at a political consensus, then there will be no legal challenges. You can always find out solutions, legal solutions, constitutional solutions, if there is a political agreement. And I'll just give you one example. It's with regard to the 11th Amendment. In 1990, after the fall of Irshad, all the political parties got together and they decided that they would want the elections to be held under the supervision of Chief Justice Shahabuddin Ahmed. So they approached the Chief Justice and they came up with an arrangement, a very normal arrangement, but thoroughly unconstitutional. When the Chief Justice, he assumed the office of Vice President, and then the President resigned, he became the acting President, and then the elections were held under his supervision, and then he returned to the office of Chief Justice. A thoroughly unconstitutional arrangement. But it was ratified by the 11th Amendment, and it has held. No one has challenged this arrangement because it was the product of a political consensus. So what we should be striving at is trying to find a middle ground and trying to find ways and means where we can get the political parties to come together and reach a sort of a solution. But there has to be an agreement on the broad issues, otherwise there will be no legal solution to a political problem. But if we have a consensus, if we solve our problems politically, then we can always come up with appropriate legal and constitutional mechanisms for implementation of the Charter. Now, it has been said that there are 4 options on the table, and indeed there are 4 options which are being actively discussed and considered by the National Consensus Commission in consultation with all the other political parties. And the special constitution order which was proposed by the NCC, the National Constitution Commission, has not gone down well, unfortunately, with some of the major political parties. But it appears that the political parties may be happy with a more blended solution. So if you have a constitution order plus a referendum plus an Article 106 opinion, then that could perhaps give some sort of legal coverage or validity to the July Charter. That is actively being considered by the Consensus Commission, and it will be put forward and discussed with the political parties in the coming days and weeks. It's already in the newspapers, so I'm not divulging anything or disclosing anything which is not there out in the public domain. The other option, which has also been discussed and it's also in the public domain, is with regard to having a Constitution Reform Assembly. There are many people or parties who are not comfortable with the idea of a Constituent Assembly. Jamima has said that he would want to scrap the Constitution and proceed with a totally new legal order. Many people share his views, but many people don't share his views, unfortunately. So a middle ground that was proposed by one of the political parties was to have a Constitution Reform Assembly, not a Constituent Assembly, but a Constitution Reform Assembly, which will comprise of the elected representatives of the next Parliament. The Parliament will double as a Constitution Reform Assembly, but the elected representatives will be exercising a higher power, not their legislative power under Article 65 of the Constitution, but a higher power, which could be the constituent power, in making or in giving effect to reform provisions which are encapsulated in the July Charter and which involve fundamental changes to the structure and identity of the Bangladesh Constitution. So that is also an option which is on the table and which is being actively discussed. Now, just one final message. Our duty as lawyers is to try and help the country at this particular point in time, because it is very rare that lawyers have the opportunity of contributing at such a crucial juncture in a country's political and constitutional history. If we follow if you have read Charles Dickens, and many of us have, then he has a very unflattering take on lawyers. They're greedy, they're self-centered, unscrupulous, everything. And sadly, this is also a view which is shared by many people in Bangladesh. But this constitutional moment that we find ourselves in gives us a rare opportunity to use our legal skill and acumen and judgment to help find and forge a way forward so that we can actually make these reforms, which are including the July Charter, sustainable and effective in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. So today's topic is the challenges and the way forward. So I'll just shortly give you my take on the challenges as I've seen them over the last year and as I've encountered them in the various constitutional cases that I've been involved in. So I think that the greatest challenge that we see towards implementation comes from the way that the parties have viewed the events of 5th of August. That defines how the parties are moving towards the implementation of the July Charter. So let me explain this. So let's just take a few of the major parties, BNP for instance. According to the BNP, 5th August revolution, 5th of August, whatever happened on 5th of August was a constitutional change. Sheikh Hasina resigned, they want Sheikh Hasina to resign, and then whatever happened happened within the constitution. And therefore their answer to the implementation of the July Revolution is also within the constitution. They want to see the next parliament implement the July Revolution. That is because they don't see anything happening outside the constitution. July Revolution for them was within the constitution, the interim government for them was within the constitution, so their solution to the implementation also has to be via parliament. That means that they want parliament to use its amending powers under Article 142 to amend the constitution and include the provisions of the July Charter into the constitution. That's their take. That's what they want to do. That's because they believe that there has been no break in the constitutional continuity since this. Now, if you come to the other two parties, Jamaat and NCP, their understanding is that whatever happened on the 5th of August, August of 2024, happened outside the constitution. Why are they saying that? They're saying that because the way that the Prime Minister left the country, that isn't provided for in the Constitution. That isn't a constitutional way of deposing a government or ending a term of a government. And how was the interim government formed? We have a chief advisor and an advisor, but there are no posts of chief advisor or advisor in our Constitution. So these are all created posts. These are sort of imagined up posts, if you like. So the position that Jamaat and the NCP have taken is that whatever happened on the 5th of August and on the 8th of August, the formation of the interim government, is outside the Constitution. And therefore their solution is also outside the existing Constitution. How is it outside the existing Constitution? What they're saying is that what happened on the 5th of August is that the people took constituent power. What's constituent power? The power to frame a new constitution. And that can only happen after a revolution. So they're saying that since the people have that power, people can exercise that power to actually frame a new constitution. Now, the solution for Jamaat and NCP is somewhat different. For Jamaat, it's like we go through a provisional constitutional order, not under the existing constitution, but under the people's authority. That's important. That's an important aspect in order about Jamaat's proposal. What the NCP is saying is more radical. We want a constituent assembly to form the new, or to frame the new constitution. So they are proceeding from the fact that whatever happened on the 5th of August happened outside the constitution, and the people now have the constituent power, which in legal terms means the power to frame a new constitution. So you see two very binary approaches. One is whatever is happening within the constitution, will stick within the constitution. That's BNP's approach. And NCP, Jamaat, and some other parties are saying no. 5th of August was a break from the constitutional tradition. If you admit that the interim government is legitimate, valid, you have to admit that we are existing outside the constitution, at least to a certain extent. That is the basis. That is how the two parties have parted, Jamaat and NCP, and on the other hand, BNP. So what is the way forward? I think that is a challenge. So what is the way forward? There's another aspect of the problem. So the problem that I identified is one party thinks that there's a break from constitutional continuity, and another party thinks no, we're within the constitution. Whatever happened has to go on from within the constitution. But there's another problem as well here. You see, most of the July Charter, if you look at the July Charter, it's about major constitutional changes. And these constitutional changes will affect the basic structure of the existing constitution. And what is the basic structure of our constitution? The basic structure of our constitution is the fundamental pillars of the constitution, without which the constitution would not have its present identity. So what our courts, and indeed the courts of India, have held is that you can amend the constitution, but you cannot change the fundamental structure or the basic structures of the constitution. Now the July Charter has a number of provisions which will change the basic structure, the fundamental identity of our existing constitution. So how will the BNP implement the July Charter without changing the fundamental structure of the existing constitution? We have not heard that from BNP's lawyers yet. And that is exactly why you will find that Jamaat and NCP want a new constitution. Because if you have a new constitution, you have a new basic structure, you are not bound by, you're not tied to the old basic structure of the old constitution. Okay? And I'll just give you one example. Okay? Everyone wants decentralization of the Supreme Court. We want High Court division benches in each of the divisions of Bangladesh. But this was decided in 1989. 1889. What was it decided? It was decided that if you do that, you're violating the basic structure of the Constitution, which is that our Constitution provides for a unitary state. So that's been decided in 1889. How can we sort of, come in 2025 and do the same thing that was decided to be unconstitutional in 1889? So, so that is something that the PNP lawyers are not dealing with. But that's not to say there's not a solution. So once again, so that takes us to what could be our solution. Okay. What could be our solution? I think the problem is, in Bangladesh, we are looking at it in very binary terms, in black and white. Either we will stay within the constitution, or we will stay without the constitution and have a new constitution. That is wrong. And that is why the parties are at loggerheads. They can't, come to a solution. And I also think that is because we haven't had the experienced lawyers input this time around as we had, let's say, in 1941 or let's say in 2007, 2008, when we had what was known as the 111 government. So I think I think the best approach is perhaps the middle approach, and that is in line with developments in constitutional theory, and it's something that one of the organizations I'm a part of is trying to put forward, is that what happened on the 5th of August, I think, was a revolution in the sense that the people did exercise some kind of constituent power. They were given the power to form a new constitution. That power they had. But at the same time, BNP is also right, in the sense that we are still operating under the existing constitution. When I go back to Bangladesh, I know there is a constitution, the courts are functioning, the executive is functioning, the legislature is obviously not there. So it's not entirely correct to say that the constitution does not exist. The constitution exists, but the 5th of August did something to the constitution, because the people did exercise some power. That cannot be denied. The people removed a somewhat legitimate government, and they formed an interim government. And they did that with some sort of power. And that's what we're calling the constituent power. So they did have some power on the 5th of August and on the 8th of August. So we have to take these two realities. One is that the people did have and still have constituent power, and there is still a constitution. So what has happened is, and what the recent scholars, mainly German scholars, what they say is that the constitution can exist, but the people can at the same time exercise this constitutional power to erode the constitution, to change the constitution while it is existing. So we can have both of what, Jamaat and the NCP is saying, as well as what BNP is saying, and we can go through a middle ground. And this is perhaps the modern approach to dealing with the problem. So what we have with BNP and Jamaat is perhaps a very old approach, where either we're in the constitution or we're outside. We have a revolution. We want a new constitution. So what we have here is a new approach, a more nuanced approach, because to say that we don't have a constitution will scare a lot of our neighbors, will scare the West. So we have to have a constitution if we don't want to scare our neighbors. So let me discuss this approach, the way forward. What does this new approach say? Unfortunately, I just have to do a bit of background, provide a bit of background here, is that the way that the theory of basic structure has developed in our country is in complete reliance on India. So whatever India has said about basic structure, we have adopted it. We have not gone beyond, behind the Indian judgments to see what theories, German theories. And they had a host of German theories. They had 3 or 4 German theories, and they decided to take one theory because it suited their country. And we did not do that. We just decided to take whatever the Indians followed. So one of the things I'll tell you what the Indian Supreme Court has done is that they've said that once you exercise constituent power and frame a constitution, people no longer have that constituent power. That's it. That's finished. Okay? But the vast majority of German scholars and modern German scholars say that no, that is a fiction of law. People always have constituent power. And in a revolution, after a revolution, they can exercise that power. So that's the problem with, let's say, BNP or Jamaat. They are thinking in terms of that Indian judgment, which we have followed, is that once the people have exercised constitutional power, that power goes away and can no longer be exercised. People will always retain that power, and that power they can use to change the constitution over time. I think that is the best way forward. Here. So what do we need to see here? What do we need to see change here? I think what we need to see change here is that BNP, perhaps as the largest political party, has to realize that constitutional power was exercised on the 5th of August and on the 8th of August, because a major change took place on those 2 dates. And if it does not recognize that, the problem is that it sort of delegitimizes what happened on those 2 dates. So it has to recognize that. And if it recognizes that constitutional power was exercised, then we can rely on the BNP to form the next parliament and then make the changes as required in the July Charter. And there is precedent for that. That has been done before. If you look at the 13th Amendment, we're all lawyers here, so most of us are anyway. The 13th Amendment was the amendment that brought in the caretaker government system. And that was brought in after what? After an mass uprising. So one of the arguments is that the 13th Amendment, this is an argument that was made on behalf of an organization that we're part of, that because the 13th Amendment was made after a mass uprising, it was made in exercise of constituent power. So it became part of the original constitution, it became part of the basic structure of our constitution. So you can't just take it away from our constitution. So what has happened on the 5th of August is the same thing. You've seen a mass uprising, the people have exercised constitutional power, and any amendments that are to be made in exercise of that constitutional power by next parliament will have the status of a basic structure of the constitution. And that's what we should be trying to achieve. It's a middle ground, because we have to make largest political party, which is the BNP, and the other small parties comfortable. We have to give them some of what they want. And what the smaller parties want is they want this satisfaction that the next parliament will implement the July Charter. And the only way we can make the BNP do that is that if they realize that constitutional power was exercised and that they are under an obligation to do so. Obviously, the BNP, the Jamaat system or the NCP system, that would have been the best approach, but we don't live in a perfect world. So perhaps If we can do that, if we can make BNP realize, because at this point in time, BNP doesn't even want to acknowledge that a constitutional break took place on 5th of August or 8th of August. If the BNP recognizes that, and we allow them to make the changes in the next parliament, that I think would be a great achievement. And that is my take on the way forward. So I'll put on the end it here. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to deal with them afterwards. Thank you very much.
Barrister Saifullah has a well-known habit of usurping the role of others, which is exactly what he did today. But I'm glad to say he's done a brilliant job of it, as the summary very clearly shows. And responding to that young man about, I suppose you're not very happy the fact that this whole thing is being conducted in Bangla. But I assure you of this, we still dream in Bangla. Even though we speak in English, I'm sorry to say. And what we do, and we have good reason to do, is to dream of a future prosperous Bangladesh, a Bangladesh that will be governed by the rule of law, there will be order, and there will be equality for all. Now, I think we have every reason to be positive, and I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say this, but I'll say it anyway. The best evidence of this lies in the fact that you had in the constitutional reform the participation of the son of a very famous Jamati. That would have been unthinkable. And in previous years, but it's happened. So I think he was not chosen because he's the son of a Jamati, but he would not have been chosen because he's the son of a Jamati. He clearly was chosen for his merits. And both the brothers sitting here are accomplished lawyers in their own right. But in thanking them for their contribution, it would be remiss of me not to remember their father. And the reason why it would be remiss is because this particular area where we are still carries his footprints. It was around here that he formed workshops and inspired the earlier generation of Muslims who were able to confidently carry the banner of Islam. If it was not for the efforts he made at the time he did, then many of us will still be in hiding and would not have been in a position to build monuments such as the East London Mosque that before you. And I'm very proud to say that he has left a very good legacy behind in his sons. Both have not only inherited his good looks, they have also, to borrow your father's motto, I can see dressed impeccably. And from the responses that I saw, prepared meticulously. Those are the two hallmarks of Barrister Razak. We remember him with fondness. And I was very privileged both to be one of his earliest students and also had the honor of him appearing before me in my humble role as a first-year judge. What an immense pleasure it was.
You allowed the appeal everything.
I did. And not because he was Barrister Razak, but because he fought valiantly and with his eloquence and, of course, his meticulous preparation, which is what really, in the end of the day, wins cases. But I'm not here to talk about the law. We have every reason to be confident. And although I came late, one of the questions that I would have wanted to ask, and I don't know whether as I'm the chair, I should indulge. If you have either of you, the moment to answer, which I think is a relevant question that was raised, which is the role of Islam in a society governed by a secular constitution. In the United Kingdom, the law books are littered with references to our laws being based on the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's just like a mantra. And I think Jami very eloquently said, we are Muslims, there's no reason why we cannot enact laws that reflect our values as Muslims, save in name. And maybe Imran will be able to fill in this. When you sat in the commission, you sat with many others. did you get the feeling that there was a sort of consensus that silently the laws and the constitutional reforms will reflect the values of the majority of the people of the country, or did you sense there was hostility to the idea? I know not. And it's something, if you could please address, then I'm sure a lot of people will have this as a burning issue to be answered. I leave then with these thoughts. The constitutional reform, which I imagine was much talked about, was simply one aspect of the Consensus Commission's work. There were, I think, 5 other areas, and I'm not going to go over this because that will definitely then eat into your sandwich time. One hopes again, and I hope that Imran will come back to answer, whether you felt that the agreements that were enshrined in the declaration, do you think there will be the appetite to enshrine those in either a constitution or in laws in the time to come? Or was it your feeling that this was just a spur of the moment and this will gather dust and get forgotten about? And that's really all I wish to say, other than to thank everyone for their appearance and attendance. From the sound of it, you all had a riveting time, is the way I would put it. And I think many more events like this will be held, and it's fantastic for us to be able to hear a first-hand from a person who was part of the Commission, the work of the Commission. I don't know whether there is any precedent for this in the history of Bangladesh. This may be the first time to come. And the fact that it has happened, it happened so quickly in the time of an interim government, whose legality I will not go into, and were able to report within a limited time, and then all of that culminated in the declaration, are good things and are positive things I think we should feel very proud of as Bangladeshis, and as evidence that we have a positive future, a prosperous future. And I wish you all the same, and thank you again for braving the weather to get here, and of course our 3 speakers. Jami I haven't spoken much about, but certainly because I am biased. He appears before me very regularly, so I better restrain myself. Otherwise, I might get accused of being actual bias as opposed to apparent bias. Thank you very much. Do you want to try and respond to those 2 points?
So, the issue of the role of Islam in the constitution making process did come up a number of times, particularly because we had to deal with the issue of state religion, and also the fact that our constitution starts with Bismillah Rahman Rahim. And there was opposition from 2 members, well, from a number of members, let's put it like that, of the commission, with regard to the inclusion of these Islamic elements, or retention rather of these Islamic elements within the constitution. But the overwhelming majority was that no, we cannot and should not remove these elements. Perhaps there were different reasons for coming to this conclusion, but the view that I think that struck a chord with everyone was that it is a reflection of our identity as Bengali Muslims. So state religion is there not because it serves the useful purpose, but because it is a reflection of who we are. And to that extent, it is important, and it is something that we have to consider when you are drawing up the constitution. So despite the objections of a number of members, and if you read the report, it's in Bengali, if you read the report, you see that the issue of state religion was the only issue on which there was dissent from 2 members. On all the other issues, the conclusions were reached on the basis of unanimity. So one of the things that I said, look, this is an issue on which there are divisions in society, so if there is a note of dissent, let there be a note of dissent. But the view that was clearly made and reflected in the report was that state religion and Bismillah Rahman Rahim were there to stay and would not be removed from the existing constitution. The second question was with regard to whether there would be, we would at the end of the day, ensure that these reforms take place. I think that there is a general consensus in favor of implementation of these reforms. Yes, there are divisions, but by and large, there are very few people who would actually say that we are against reform. I'll just give an example of I'll just give a reference to a discussion I was having with an advisor, and he was saying that, look, in the weeks preceding 5th of August, the demand was not made for a new state or a new Bangladesh, or Bangladesh 2.0. All the students were only clamoring for resignation of PM. But you know, he was wrong. I think the advisor was wrong, because what he missed, the point that he missed was, in the months and the years preceding 5th of August, the state, government, ruling party had all coalesced into the office of the PM. So that when people were clamoring for the resignation of the PM, they were in fact calling for constitutional reforms. They were in fact calling for fundamental changes to the state. That is the problem that we have in Bangladesh, is that many of the influential advisors within the interim government, they do not realize that the mandate they have. That is why they are not as assertive and as strong as they should be, as strong-willed as they should be. But they have the mandate of the people, and they, if they want to, they can just ram in through these, ensure that these reform proposals are implemented. But unfortunately, there is a conceptual problem, which is why we are facing the challenge that we are facing. But all said and done, I think that still, by and large, we are heading in the right direction, and inshallah, we will see some meaningful reforms have taken place by the time elections are held next year, inshallah. Thank you very much.
And thank you all again for indulging me in these two questions, and well answered. So, that is it. Your sandwich awaits you. Assalamu alaikum.
So yes, in a country of 90% Muslim, to ask this question, would the Quran be part of Constitution, is a logical fallacy. Quran will be the source of inspiration for many things, many laws that we would legislate in the future, have legislated in the past, and are undergoing currently right now. For many practical reasons, sensible reasons, it will not say it is taken from the Quran. So with that now, what is the international view on the constitutional journey that Bangladesh is going through now? The first and the foremost concern of all this constitutional debate is how Bangladesh is going to organize its institutions, constitutional institutions. That is what one of the major things the international community and the body would like to see. And we know that Human Rights Commissioner was very deeply involved with at least with one short investigative process, for which they have given us conclusive evidence or statement to the effect that the Hasina regime did in fact carry out crimes against humanity in the form of mass murders. That then takes us to the aspect of legal applications of this finding. How are we going to apply that? Now, law is not to be easily taken and not to be reluctantly legislated. Once you take a law, you must have the intention to apply it. And once you declare the process of enforcing the law, you must apply it with your full force. Now that we have a finding from a neutral international body that there had been crimes against humanity that were carried out in the country, and we know the culprit, and there is afoot at the moment when we speak, as we speak, a few trials, at least two of the trials are afoot, going on at the International Crimes Tribunal in Bangladesh. How are these going to be judicially accountable? The international concern is through these constitutional institutions and enhancing their capacities. How are we going to conform with the international norms of judicial accountability? Is the trial that we are holding is going to be one accepted, at least, by the international community, the judicial observers, the human rights observers. That one concern. The decisions made by the tribunal, will they be properly and effectively challenged at the appeal court, and whether those accused have a chance to represent themselves in those courts. So this is one level of institutional challenge. The other challenge that the international community wants to see and actually want some assurance about is the political process. Will there be a transition to a political government from this government whose legitimacy is at best questionable, because there is a reference from the article, under the Article 106, and of course I will plead my ignorance in my defense that I have not seen or read the reference sent to the court or the judgment sent by the court. And I do not think that many people have seen or read those two documents. Once the political government comes in, what will happen to the contracts, the treaties that this government has entered into? Will there be political legitimization by the next political government of this government now, this interim government? What will happen to the power contracts, for example, with all these companies? What will the legal status of those? These are, I mentioned institutions, now I mention the process of politics and the transition. And then the other aspect, the protection of the individuals. The international body, they can protect themselves. They have mechanics to enforce their interest. Corporations who have gone into private government, they also have mechanics. For example, if you want to challenge the Hasina regime's contract with Oracle, which is absolutely 99.98% in favor of Oracle, against the interest of Bangladeshi government, you have to challenge it in court of England. So they have some mechanics of protection. For example, if an individual, I give you two examples, if I may be allowed to mention names. We know how a major Zia of Bangladesh Army was trapped into an environment where he was sold to the international community as evidence that there is organized terrorism that has made its way into the civil forces. And that then worked as a security guarantee for the government from the Western powers. Do whatever you want to clean that. Now he wants to go back to Bangladesh, and there is simply a non-responsive government who does not even respond to any request that he is making. Can he then challenge all these judicial process, the 3 death sentences that he was given? Can he challenge those? The Facebook celebrity, one of the powerful forces behind the student revolution, who lives in France, United Protocharji, can he return to Bangladesh and fight his court cases? These are cases of famous people. But then there are cases of not very famous people that we as lawyers in England, in America, in Australia, New Zealand, have had to gain political asylum, who do not have political power. They're simply foot soldiers of the parties opposing Hasina, and they were marked out. For various reasons they were marked out, because they would be attacked wherever they're found. But they do not have the power and the capacity and the parties backing behind them. What will be the mechanics of protection for the individuals who do not have political support, who do not have institutional belonging and support, who are not acknowledged as being a serious actor or serious enough interest for the country by the government? What will happen to those individuals? These aspects were not very well ventilated into the international arena. So the people who observe the political constitutional process that has, the discussions with the political parties that has taken place in Bangladesh, a number of them, at least I counted 30 meetings. I'll be corrected by Barrister Imran Siddiq, but I think there were 30 meetings so far that I counted of this commission, these are not very well ventilated into Western press. There are no any official writing or opinion pieces written on the progress and the process by members or people who have taken interest in the process. In the UK, we have party political leaders, party political intellectuals who write in the international and national press about their position. But that was not the case in Bangladesh. Some people claiming, well, I again beg forgiveness for this word, because they pass themselves as intellectuals but nothing more than party propagandists. Intellectual constitutional documents of those significance, if these are written by propagandists, then of course they do not carry weight with the international arena, international stakeholders. And by international stakeholders, we only have one sort of stakeholders: development partners and people who are politically interested. There is only one party, one country that is singularly politically interested in Bangladesh, that is India. The rest of the world are, in various degrees and forms, our development partners. Whatever politics comes, and they are in the form of development economics, they are in the form of one shape or the other, have something to do with the economy and the relief they send to our country. For example, the political interest that America has is simply mostly designed, directed towards addressing the Burma Act in the southeast part of the country that we have, and access to the sea, all those kind of things. So they have a financial backing to their political interest, whereas the neighbor does not have any financial interest in our country as such, apart from maybe corridor or other things. So there are two distinct natures of international interest. Those are not, I feel, are not addressed in the constitutional debate in the country. How we engage with development partners and how we engage in regional politics. Geopolitical shifting in the region, yes, I think this was in the back of the mind of all the people who are involved, but this is not a subject that has taken any open discussion. In terms of the fourth point that I would make, it is this. In course of an existing parliament, we have issues debated in the parliament. We do not have the parliament. So that debate has now mostly moved into the social space, in Facebook, in this case mostly in Facebook. X and other platforms are not that much utilized. That debate has moved into some articles in some level, very limited extent, in newspapers. And the other issues are other aspects of engagement, public engagement, are the local TV talk shows. And then, of course, close to the parliament that we have now is the political party attending the Foreign Service Committee, the State Guest House of Jamuna, to discuss the work of the Constitutional Reform Commission. That is the closest thing to parliament we have. So that debate, the engagement of the mass people did not happen. What the question I will ask, and I would want to know and understand, is how that public engagement was ensured in this constitutional debate. On one spectrum, you have a major party, BNP. On the other spectrum, you have the latest newborn party, NCP. And there's wide range and spectrum of parties in between. How a balance was struck in proportionate representation of these parties. And since I mentioned the word proportionate representation, I also raised this, that there is a lack of understanding how proportional representation is being played out in the discussion, because it has an endless number of combination and commutation. How many ways we can represent proportionate, the mathematics can work. For example, there is an existing proportionate representation system in the existing constitution. Based on the number of MPs, you decide what number of the 50 reserved MPs or 80 MPs you would have. There is a proportionate voting system already in our existing constitution. How that can be expanded? Whether that depend on the number of MPs, or would it depend on the number of votes the lower tier parliament or representative gets? I have not seen a wide range of discussion on any sort of combination of these proportional representation, there seems to be only one discussion about that. That how many votes or MP you get at the lower tier, that must be the case in the upper tier. Whether I or not I am in favor of an upper tier, that's another matter. But in whatever combination we have it, there was a lack of clarity in the discussion about what options of proportionate representation we are talking about. The numbers and mathematics of it were not present in the discussion, in any of the discussions that I followed and I heard. So these are my observations, and with that I will leave for the panel to speak.
Thank you very much, Barrister Imran for his precious
Our own Judge Belayet Hussain presiding over today's seminar. I think I am very pleased to say that this is one of the very informed and I would say very intellectual in terms of the nature, in terms of the presentation, a seminar we have witnessed and enjoyed today. Don't you think we should have more seminars like this?
Yes.
To be arranged by Legal Nexus and our other organizations like SPBS and others. I'm not going to take that long. I was contemplating, and this was obviously the case, that Judge Hussain would be summarizing today's seminar, the discussions, the question and answer, but unfortunately I was the acting chair for the time being, very short-lived until the sir arrived. What we will do actually, we will create a statement, a formal statement, and then we will forward this to you by email, and if you don't receive it, of course, we will forward this to you, whichever means you want. And also, I think it is right that I touch upon some of the discussions took place today. Started with Barrister Afzal Zameen. He touched upon the international perspectives on the July Charter implementation, the effect of it, and then what are the inspirations of the international stakeholders. He identified two types of stakeholders, interested parties. One was the politically interested parties, and which is one country only, India. I think Burma is also, but he did not mention it, but from my understanding that Burma is also a politically interested party in respect of this government, the revolution, the July Charter, and the future of it. Because we are hosting a huge number of Myanmar citizens in Bangladesh. And the rest of the world, including United States, United Kingdom, European Union, they are our development partners. Their aspiration, their interest lies on our strength, constitutional strength, the implementation of our next constitutional way forward is very important, because they want to have good business with us, development in respect to international relations, and of course the surrounding countries like China and other countries, of course, are very important for European Union, UK and United States. So these are the aspects that have been discussed and have been outlined and illustrated by Barrister Afzal Zameen. And of course, his view is a very, I would say, in his expressing his views is very strong, because he's a very patriotic person. He doesn't shy away of speaking his mind or heart, and then he wants a Bangladesh with a more just legal order. Barrister Hassan Siddiqui, of course, discussed about the way forward and various aspects of the July Charter implementation, the BNP's view, perhaps the most powerful political party in Bangladesh, and the Jamaat and the NCP and other political parties' views of how to implement July Charter. What is the problem in respect of implementing the July Charter, and what is how the July 5th of August intervened hugely in the current structure of the Constitution. And he outlined that the BNP's approach and Jamaat's approach, they are not far away. Everyone, all the parties, the NCPs and everyone, are actually in agreement to do better for the country, but in different ways, different path they want to take. Constitutional Reform Assembly has been proposed by NCP. Jamaat has a different view. Of course, BNP does have a different view as well. And these are the challenges. And of course, Barrister Hassan Siddiqui hoped that the political parties, the stakeholders, will come to a consensus to make this July Charter into the implementation and come about a more just legal order. Barrister Imran Siddiq touched upon, and then of course he gave the background. He did mention, he highlighted that the July Charter is the aspiration of the people of Bangladesh. The Constitution has been, one way or another, Constitution has been hugely intervened. There is a concern whether the activities of the interim government would be regarded as legal or legitimate in the coming future. So this is why, for the protection of the individuals, for the protection of the international treaties, for the protection of the aspiration of the July fighters, like my brother here, political consensus is immensely necessary. Did you read, I just want to ask, did you read, particularly the July fighter, did you read the July Charter? You should. We'll send a copy to you, the amended one. We'll send a copy to you. And then we should all read it. What's in there? How I would not say the founding fathers of the country, but I think we are at the juncture of a new Bangladesh, the founding fathers of the new Bangladesh, how they are thinking about it, what they want to do, political stakeholders, how they want to shape the legal and, of course, the political landscape of Bangladesh. You should read it, and particularly those who want to become an MP in Bangladesh, from Jamaat Islami, from NCP, from BNP as well, Jami bhai. I think you should read it. I quickly touch upon some aspects. In respect of the language, 30 parties are in agreement. The Bangla should be, and then the local languages should be in there. As a nation, we are Bengali, but so as a nation, you are Bengali, but as a citizen, we are Bangladeshi. 31 parties agreed on it. In respect of the amendment of the Constitution, particular provisions, 30 parties agreed. Evolution of the Constitution, 28 parties agreed. Emergency situation in Bangladesh, I think there are some aspects in it. 29 parties agreed. Fundamental rights agreed by 31 parties. Presidential election agreed by 28 parties, but note of dissent from Islami Andolan Bangladesh. President's power and responsibilities, 31 parties agreed. Note of dissent from proposed 5th and 6th from BNP. And then, of course, Prime Minister's terms in the office, 29 party agreed. Prime Ministers holding other positions, note of dissent from BNP, 12 party alliance. And then, of course, caretaker government provisions, 29 parties agreed. Let me just, yeah, and so forth, yes. Very quickly.
Barrister Saifullah has a well-known habit of usurping the role of others, which is exactly what he did today. But I'm glad to say he's done a brilliant job of it, as the summary very clearly shows.
I would say from my heart, and thank you very much all of you to coming here. We have a wonderful discussion, and you can see the whole audience, mashallah. 70 to 80% are lawyer and barrister solicitors, and all other civic societies people is here. This is how we have to build a nation. This is how we have to build a society. So this is a political program. Of course, I think this question is 100% obliged to give the answer. But for this is not a political platform even. So I would say then we will try our level best to have the answer from Jamaat Islami, and then we will convey the message to the person who questioned about it. What do you think? Is this right? Thank you very much. So, Alhamdulillah, we are coming to the conclusion now. Presenter to come to the end to the program. Inshallah, we have few events remaining. A summary statement of the 2 days conference or seminar. And then our president of this 2 days program, inshallah, will will give a closing speech.
We have with us today the president of Solicitors SBPS, Nurul Ghaffar. We also have the secretary of SBPS, Murshad Habib. We have our respected brother Atabhai, as always, the senior figure today with us.
President of Greater Senate Council.
President of Greater Senate Council. Okay, thank you for that.